really scared, and we are shaken to the core to hear all this talk about the war, about the
Hey guys,
the ground invasion, with
back again.
consideration for the 2 million civilians who are in Gaza and who have nowhere to go. It is really shocking.
In the event that this does lead to a ground invasion, and of course there is a lot of speculation that the cutout of communications that Gaza is going through at the moment could be a precursor to that. Do your teams in the hospitals have any instructions or any plan about what they might do in the event that there is a ground invasion and Israeli troops do start making their way into northern Gaza?
Well, our teams have little options before them. They are there. They have patients in the hospitals, including children and incubators, including wounded and sick people who are in ICU units, so they cannot move. They cannot move them. We don't have the facilities to move them. Besides, we have 12,000 people who are sheltering there. So we said, our teams have told us that they are going to stay, and they are going to stay as long as the people are staying there. So we're not really sure how close the army is going to the Israeli occupation forces are going to come to the Gaza city, to the hospital, and what they are going to do with all those people who are sheltering, and whether they are going to bomb their way through to reach whatever the destination they are going to reach, inside the Gaza city. So we are extremely, extremely worried, and we are really concerned about the lives of those people. I mean, apart from, you have 300,000 civilians who are still crammed in Gaza city. Where to go at this time of night? Where to go without transportation, without fuel? And there are no safe places in Gaza. So everyone is put in a very impossible position. We don't know what to do. We only call on the international community again and again for some sane voices to come out and say, stop the fighting, stop the fighting. All this talk about pauses or this trickling of aid means nothing to the civilians who are in Gaza. The only thing that can mean anything is stop the fighting right now.
So there are people around the world, including world leaders and decision makers, who are watching Algezeera tonight and watching you make these statements. If you have one message that you want to give them, what would it be?
It is. I'm listening to some of the news broadcasts. I am shocked to the core about all this talk about the technical war, about the technical aspects of going in, and not one word about the 2 million civilians who are trapped in Gaza. This is shocking. This is really shocking. The world the history is going to judge those world leaders if they don't intervene now. And the warning is, if and when Israel goes into Gaza, there are going to be more and more massacres of innocent civilians. And that is going to be on the hands of all those leaders who have given the green light for Israel to go ahead without any restraint.
Marwan Jelani is Director General of Palestine Red Crescent Society. He's been speaking to us from Ramallah. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Okay, let's turn our attention to New York, where an emergency special session at the UN General Assembly on the war on Gaza has adjourned, and a vote's expected in actually about 40 minutes' time on a resolution that is going to call for a durable truce. Well, the UN
A durable truce. The United Nations is going to ask for.
Two key words are missing in the resolution before us.
Yeah, America and US.
It is outrageous.
Right, I'm going to try and make a cup of coffee.
The perpetrators
So,
of the October 7th terrorist attack.
Listen to the TV for 5 minutes while I make a cup of coffee.
It is outrageous.
I'll be right back.
Another key word missing in this resolution is hostage. This resolution makes no mention of the innocent people, including citizens of many of you in this room, many of you here today who have citizens who are being held hostage by Hamas and other terrorist groups.
Egypt's ambassador to the UN urged for support to achieve one standard to stop the war and protect civilians.
The reality is that not stopping this war now, before it's too late, could push the whole region towards a devastating regional war that will also affect the interests of those who are stalling in calling for its end, more so than the interests of other countries. The reality also is that failure to come out of this crisis with a clear vision to revive a serious peace process that addresses the roots of the current crisis and leads to a two-state solution would be a grave mistake with long-term repercussions.
We'll get more with our diplomatic editor, James Bays, who's been with us for the last few hours as that UN General Assembly Special Assembly has been going on. We've already had a very, very strong statement from the General Secretary of the UN. We've also heard very strong language, very emotive language in some cases from some of the speakers. Talk us through what the procedure is. What is it they're actually talking about?
Well, they're talking about a durable humanitarian truce to allow aid to be delivered. That is the central part of what they're discussing. Now, I agree with my colleague, the senior political analyst, Marwan Bashara, that seeing the events on the ground that we've seen in the last couple of hours, it's very unlikely, whatever they decide, that that is going to happen. You've had a remarkable split-screen moment in the last couple of hours on Algezeera, the UN talking about diplomacy and action. The US ambassador you heard speaking there, while she was speaking, the onslaught, the bombardment started really during her speech, and all the communications to Gaza were cut off, suggesting, and the Israeli military are now hinting at it very strongly, that a very new phase is starting with significant ground operations getting underway. So this is not going to, I think, lead to the truce, but I think it's still very, very important because this is a chance to take the temperature of the whole international community. We know the Security Council, just 15 members, they are stalled on this. The General Assembly is 193 nations, every single nation of the United Nations, electronic voting system. They'll press the button and we'll see where every single country in the world, every single UN member stands on this. The session starts in about 15 minutes' time from now. Just to be clear, there are two different things before them. I'll hold them up here. There's the main resolution, which is being put forward by the Arab states led by Jordan. And then there is an amendment proposed by Canada, now joined by the US. The US ambassador made it clear that this Arab text is missing. You heard her say two things, mentions of Hamas and mentions of, she says, the taking of hostages by Hamas. That's why they want to add those things in it in the amendment. So what we're going to see, and I warn you, General Assembly sessions don't normally start on time, and there's quite a lot of speeches often before the votes. But we're going to see two important votes which show, I think, where every single country in the world stands.
One of the key things that you were mentioning to us earlier, though, is the fact that this is non-binding, that it doesn't carry the weight, perhaps, that a ruling from, say, the UN Security Council might. What is the significance, other than just taking the temperature of how the rest?
Well, I think it is taking the temperature. I think it shows where the whole world stands. It shows where the Arab countries stand. It shows where the global South stands, and it shows where the US and the West stand. And will they be on different pages on this? I think this is going to be very clear soon. The Security Council, as you say, has achieved nothing so far. Lots of different draft resolutions have gone before it. They've either failed or they have been vetoed. It's worth saying that the Security Council is still looking at a resolution. It's Malta, actually, that's leading the negotiations among the non-permanent members of the Security Council to try and find something that could be a compromise that they could all go all agree upon. I would add, though, one other caveat, which, although it's binding international law, a Security Council resolution, even if they manage to vote on something and agree on something, all 15 members of the Security Council, Israel is already defying a number of UN Security Council resolutions that have been in place for many years.
And of course, as you were mentioning before, we have been seeing the attacks going on in Gaza as that debate is carrying on. Obviously, we're going to be talking to you as the vote gets closer, but for now, James, thank you very much indeed. You're watching Algezeera. A reminder of the top developments in Israel's war on Gaza. The Gaza Strip has been subjected to the largest Israeli bombardment since the start of the war on October the 7th. Israel is bombing residential areas in the north and the center of the Strip. The United Nations says civil order has collapsed. Most phone signals in Gaza have been cut off. The Red Crescent is warning that the lack of communications in Gaza means people can no longer access ambulance services. Almost half of the hospitals in Gaza have been forced to close. Those remaining open are struggling to provide services. The Israeli military spokesman is calling on residents of Gaza City to move south, but shelling is ongoing there as well. He says ground forces will expand operations later on Friday. Now, the World Food Programme says 9 of its trucks have entered Gaza since the Rafah crossing was opened on Saturday, but it warns that to reach the 1 million Palestinians in need, 40 trucks a day need to get into Gaza. The WFP says it's provided emergency supplies of canned tuna and bread to 475,000 displaced Palestinians in UN shelters. Previously, 23 bakeries contracted to the WFP were feeding almost 250,000 people a day, but now just 2 are operating because of a lack of fuel. The WFP says that for every person who receives assistance, at least 6 more are in need.
Coming back, guys. Sorry.
Tabia Atifa is the senior Middle East spokesperson for the World Food Programme, and she describes some of the challenges for the teams in Gaza.
I was making coffee.
Definitely Gaza is struggling with the lack of basic supplies and severe fuel shortages.
Sorry, guys. I was making coffee, but I was also digging through the bottom of the freezer, and I found 2 big apple pies and 8 yogurts, which is good news.
While we welcome the opening of the Rafah border crossing point last week,
I don't know if I missed anything.
the number of humanitarian aid that has trickled inside Gaza on these convoys has been really very limited. So it's a very difficult situation. The amount that we
Gaza is being strangled. The few aid.
like probably less than 100,000
Well,
people.
that's the first rule of war. Cut off communication, cut off food and water, and starve your enemy out.
For us to be able to provide
First
assistance
rule of
to
war.
people in Gaza, to scale up our operation, to provide food for 1 million people, we need 40 trucks of WFP food to enter every day through this border crossing point. So we definitely, it's not enough. We need more,
Support terrorists. You suffer the wrath of. You suffer the wrath of Israel and America and the UK.
Strikes on Gaza since October the 7th. But US President Joe Biden's questioned the death,
Anyway,
saying he has no
fire away questions.
In response, the health ministries released the full list of those killed with each person's identity number, including more than 3,000 children. Human Rights Watch says the ministry's number is in line with the intensity of the attacks and that its data has proved accurate in the past. Omar Shakir is Israel and Palestine Director at Human Rights Watch. He says the death toll reported by the Gaza Health Ministry is reliable.
Human Rights Watch has been doing work on the occupied Palestinian territory for more than 3 decades. We've covered multiple rounds of hostilities in Gaza, and we've always found the numbers from the Gaza Health Ministry to be generally reliable. When we've done independent verification of particular strains, the numbers have
Very important word there.
no major
Generally, which means not all the time. You've gotta listen to what's said.
And that's why the UN OCHA, that's why the US State
And you've
Department,
got to listen to what's said, not hear what you want to hear.
Independently verify. And I would add that what we're seeing based on the scale of devastation being wrought on Gaza, based on satellite imagery, videos, interviews we're doing, suggests that the death toll numbers that they're producing are in line with what you would expect with this intense sort of bombardment in a very densely populated area. We've been documenting this for many years, and we've seen no evidence.
This has been going on all my life.
Ever engaged in that sort of conduct. They get their information directly from hospitals, that the casualty numbers are distinct from statements that are issued by ministers, even the health minister. The numbers are obtained through a process of information collection that we've generally found to be reliable. And I think the most important point here is all this time we're spending debating death counts and death tolls, the bodies continue to pile up. And the focus for leaders really needs to be on preventing further mass atrocities, not quibbling over numbers where those experts, virtually everybody who's worked in Gaza, knows that these numbers are reliable. And again, just yesterday, the Gaza Health Ministry published the names, the ages, the ID numbers of everybody who claimed to be killed.
Oh, what does that say?
At least 4 Palestinians have been killed by the Israeli army in the occupied West Bank in overnight attacks. There have been confrontations between Palestinian fighters and Israeli soldiers conducting raids. Videos circulating online show Israeli forces storming the city of Jenin. Imran Khan has more from the Jenin refugee camp.
The Palestinians here are burying their dead. Now, it's worth pointing out that this actual graveyard was only set up in July, and already it has 17 people that are buried here. Now, one of those was actually a senior figure in the Jenin battalions. Now, it's worth pointing out as well that the Jenin battalions actually are only in the camp because they grew up there and they grew up resisting occupation. They wouldn't be there if it wasn't for the occupation. And they have this right to resist under international law. Now, the actual raid started around 1 o'clock in the morning. The Israelis came from various different directions, including this road that I'm on at the moment. It's just worth showing you just this road over here. Whilst the raid was going on, the Israelis brought in a heavily armored bulldozer and they started digging up the road. Now, if they were trying to cut off the electricity or cut off the water supply, there are far easier ways of doing it. And Palestinians are telling us that actually this is just harassment of the people living in the camp. Now, while these raids are commonplace, by no means are the residents actually getting used to them.
We've got nothing left to lose. The occupation targets the land, the trees, the stones, the children, women and elderly. What's left? What do they expect us to do?
This is also where Sharina...
I really don't understand how Israel is getting away with it. I really do.
Here for Palestinians who see her as a hero when it comes to journalists reporting on the occupation. But more than
this
that,
is pure
this
bullying.
Kind of thing that is now becoming much more commonplace. The harassment of Palestinians living within Jenin refugee camp, and what they're telling us, this is now what is happening. The commander of the Israeli army in the West Bank says the gloves...
Palestinian detainees not getting medical assistance or access to lawyers. Prison society.
Imran Khan, Jenin refugee camp.
Jenin occupied
The summit in Brussels, EU leaders
West Bank.
in a common position on calls for a ceasefire in Gaza. Steph Bassen's in Brussels, and she sent us this report.
After 2 days of talks, it has become clear that European leaders have little to offer when it comes to reducing tensions in the Middle East. After discussing for a long time on Thursday about the wording of a humanitarian pause or pauses, today it has not become much clearer on what these humanitarian pauses will be and how they can be implemented. President Macron from France, initially before the summit, was talking about an international coalition against Hamas, comparable to an international coalition against ISIL that Western nations had before. But today he was talking about an international humanitarian coalition. This is what he had to say.
We will build a humanitarian coalition with several European nations, in particular Cyprus, that will serve as a rear base for a naval humanitarian corridor. We've also had discussions with Greece, which is ready to send equipment.
Another idea that has come from this summit is this international peace conference, which was suggested by Spain to be held soon. No more details have been given about this conference, but it's now being said that they want this conference to be held within 6 months. Ahead of the summit, the president of the European Council, Charles Michel, was saying that some people were questioning the European credibility in the Middle East, but some may conclude after the 2 days of talks that it also is losing its relevance in the Middle East. Steph Algezeera in Brussels.
A group of protesters gathered outside the office of the UK Foreign Secretary, calling for the protection of children in Gaza. Eve Barker is outside the Foreign Office in London.
It's a touching show of solidarity outside the Foreign Office here in London for all of the innocents that have died in Gaza and the West Bank. This after Western government, followed by Western government, continues to offer its unequivocal support for Israel. But nevertheless, public opinion is most certainly shifting, and legal opinion is also. More than 250 of the country's leading lawyers, we're talking about incredibly senior King's councillors or senior judges, have tabled an open letter to the government in what is tantamount to legal advice, whether the government wants it or not. And in that letter, it advises three things. Firstly, an unconditional ceasefire as opposed to a humanitarian pause. That the British government ends the sale of weapons to Israel. And thirdly, the government avoids running the risk of breaching the Geneva Convention by aiding and abetting a government that, in the lawyer's opinion, is openly in breach of global humanitarian law. What is clear is that the Benjamin Netanyahu government needs the moral and military support of the West. But as these protesters and others opposed to the war across the continent are
Look at me, I've been on telly. Look at me, Daddy, Mummy.
Whatever Benjamin Netanyahu's military objectives are, and perhaps the willingness of Western governments to support him. Eve Barker, Algezeera, London.
Darina Abougait is going to be here in a couple of minutes with more on our coverage of Israel's war on Gaza. I'm Rob Matheson. Stay with us on Al Jazeera.
Right, anybody in the room?
On counting the cost, the war on Gaza puts the resilience.
Yeah, going back to someone earlier complaining about subscription mode on. Well, it's funny how the other channels manage all right, and it's all right how Al Jazeera manage on their YouTube channel with subscription only and 2 minutes between each chat.
Amidst the world slowdown, we stand firm as home to a fifth of global nickel reserves. Indonesia is poised to lead the global EV battery industry. We adeptly manage our abundant resources and play a vital role in solar energy harnessing, offering 75% of global carbon credit potential, committed to environmental protection, enhancing investment climate through digital licensing. Indonesia, your better tomorrow.
More than 1 million Palestinians will leave their houses and move to the south of the Gaza Strip, an area that can't be really enough for hosting this massive number of displaced people.
They are evacuating from a place to a place. They are forced to do this. There isn't any safe place to go. Thousands of people.
I'm only 10. What am I supposed to do? Fix it?
Investigating the use and abuse of power across the globe on Al Jazeera.
You're watching the News Hour live from our headquarters in Doha. I'm Darina Abougait, coming up in the next 60 minutes. Loud explosions across Gaza as Israel continues its relentless bombardment. Israel says its forces are expanding activity in strip phone lines.
5th of November early. It's awesome.
We don't have any.
There ain't going to be a lot of Gaza left by the end of tonight.
Totally isolated.
Well, northern Gaza anyway.
While an emergency special session at the United Nations General Assembly on the war is underway, and a vote on a resolution that calls for a durable truce is due any moment.
Gaza is being strangled.
The people of Gaza feel shamed, alienated, and abandoned.
More aid trucks arrive in Gaza. The UN describes the deliveries as crumbs that are nowhere near enough. It's just past 1900 hours GMT. That's 10 p.m. in Gaza, and we'll recap the latest.
Not for much longer, though.
The Strip has been subjected to the largest Israeli bombardment since the start of the war on October 7th. Israel is bombing residential areas in the north and the center of the Strip, and the UN says civil order has collapsed. The Israeli military spokesman is calling on residents of Gaza City to move south.
Civil order has collapsed. Was there any?
Forces will expand operations tonight. Meanwhile, Algezeera sources say negotiations are progressing between Hamas and Israel on a ceasefire and prisoner exchange deal. These talks are being mediated by Qatar. So you can see those pictures right there. They show several rockets being fired from Gaza into Ashkelon in southern Israel, and the rockets are set to have hit buildings in the city. Most of its residents have already left after being told to evacuate by the army. We have Tarek Abu-Azoum. He's joining us.
Oh, what you're watching now is not Gaza. It's actually Israel, Ashkelon.
To the ground. The medical teams are trying to packling the time in order to rescue victims. Till now, the number of the victims and casualties is still unknown. The Palestinian Minister of Health in a catastrophic condition due to the Israeli unprecedented bombardment to different areas inside Gaza. Now, with the ongoing cut out of electricity, the cut out of able to communicate with people around the world, but even between them inside the besieged
right.
Happening on the ground.
The mobile phone network hasn't been taken down by Israel at all. It's been taken down because of the heavy bombardment. Every Guy Fawkes night in the UK, our internet goes down for a few hours, not because of problem with the network, because of all the fireworks going off, all the bangs. When you get a sonic boom, it's going to knock out the transmitters.
Completely chaotic. Palestinians are really desperate with the ongoing Israeli closure of borders, and even with the limited number of humanitarian aids that had been delivered to the territory. What we can say that now 2.3 million Palestinians are isolated from the world, waiting for further development in the network in order to know how to communicate with others and even with the international community. This is the current situation on the ground in Gaza. Thank you so much.
Tarek Abu-Azoum reporting for us from Khan Younis over in Gaza. We're going to stick with Gaza for a moment. You can see the pictures. These are the latest pictures, in fact, where you can see the bombardment taking place in the Strip. And we are going to bring in Safwat El-Kahlout. He's reporting for us from the north of Gaza. Safwat, that's where you're talking to us from. Just tell us what you've been seeing and hearing, because we understand that Israel has intensified its bombing of Gaza the past few hours.
Yes, we learned that under this strong fire in the last 3 or 4 hours, that the Israeli army is carrying out limited operations in the north and in east of Gaza City and in the north of Gaza Strip. These limited operations with tanks, of course, as far as we understood, it could be preparation for a wider operation that might lead it into ground operation, but still there is no indication of ground operation. We could see the flashes of the Israeli either artillery or the airstrikes in the north of the Gaza Strip and even in Gaza City itself, specifically at the eastern side of Gaza, where the Israeli army and its tanks are operating and carrying out such operations.
So, Safwat, earlier on you had also been reporting that there were reports of explosions that were coming from the sea. Is that still ongoing?
I am 200 meters away, by the way, from the sea. I could hear also some explosions coming from the sea, but we don't know where are these shells, where they are landing, specifically in the north of the Gaza Strip. I'm in the central area, but from the top of my building, I can see the flashes of the explosions, either from
this here
artillery,
is my light.
airstrikes, but
It's not anything to do with the TV. Let me switch it off.
and western part of Gaza City and of the north of the Gaza.
Oh, you can see the computer now.
So when the Israeli
Never mind.
spokesman said just a few hours ago that he came up and spoke for the second time, in fact, said that they are expanding their ground operations. And now you seem to be reporting that there are some limited operations using tanks in the northern part of Gaza. Has there been any response from Al-Qassam brigades or anyone from Hamas to the comments that were made by the Israeli spokesman?
We could see rockets that were fired from Gaza into southern Israel, and even those with long range fired into Tel Aviv and the central area of Israel. Still, the fighting groups are still able to mobilize and work.
Whoa! Oh, sir, Ashkelon. Okay.
In advance before the operations or the attack they carried out in October 7th. This is an indication that the Israelis are not hitting, as they said, or claim the infrastructure of the fighting groups, since they are able to fire freely or whenever they want.
Whoever liked, thanks. When you watch it back, thanks.
The tunnel network underground are still able to prevent the Israelis from carrying out the ground operation. This means that
this is a flare. We use them for lighting up a night sky. They're missiles being fired into Ashkelon and Tel Aviv from Gaza.
And carry out their attacks whenever they want and the way they want.
Safwat, while I have you with us, just update us on the situation with the telecommunications lines, because we understand that people are disconnected from each other, and certainly they seem to be disconnected from the outside world.
Well, this point touches everybody in the Gaza Strip, because more than 1.5 million of the population of Gaza has been moved from south to north and from north to south, to seeking a shelter or seeking a safer place. So since in the last 3 hours, people are unable to communicate or to stay in touch with their relatives, their parents, or their sons, especially after every explosion, as they are used to doing during the 3 weeks of Israeli war. Now there is fear. I think even our colleague Tarek, who is now staying 20 kilometers from his family,
Whoa!
As a father, he is very much worried. I have been receiving also calls from people who are living in Europe or abroad, and their families are in Gaza, and could stay in touch with them to make sure that they are still alive. And now people say we are still alive. Nobody says we are fine or we are good. So,
well, they're not going to phone up and say, "Oh, look, I'm sorry, I'm dead." If they're phoning up, of course they're lying. Oh God, these reporters are plats. That's hilarious. Oh, they're ringing up to say, "Hi, I'm alive." Well, you're not ringing up to say you're dead, are you? Oh, dear. Hey, Mum. Hey, Dad. I'm dead. I'm ringing you from heaven. Oh, dear.
Okay, Safwat, we'll let you go for now. We thank you so much. That's Safwat Al-Kahlout reporting for us from Gaza.
Can I go to Gaza and can I pick all the dead people's phones?
The UN General Assembly
Sell them on eBay.
To vote on a resolution, and this resolution calls for a humanitarian truce in Gaza, which would hopefully lead to a cessation of hostilities between Israel and Hamas. So what we understand is going to happen is that there's going to be a first vote, in fact, on an amendment that Canada and the US had wanted to add the word, quote, Hamas to the initial resolution. So we believe that there will be a vote first on the amendment, and then the resolution will also be put forward to a vote. So once the voting begins, we will cross back to the United Nations and see how that transpires. Well, earlier, the spokesman from the US, Stefan Dujarric, said that needs in Gaza are growing more critical.
The humanitarian system in Gaza is facing a total collapse with unimaginable consequences for more than 2 million civilians. As the bombing intensifies, needs are growing ever more critical and colossal. About 500 trucks per day were crossing into Gaza before the hostilities began. In recent days, an average of only
500 trucks a day. Wow.
Despite needs being far greater than they were at any time before. The Secretary General welcomes the growing global consensus for a humanitarian pause in the conflict, and he repeats his
these people are getting 20 trucks
and the
a day.
delivery of life-saving supplies.
My town has 11,000 people, and we get at least 20 to 40 delivery trucks every day. I live above the shopping centre. My frozen food shop gets at least 2. One of the supermarkets next door to it gets between 2 and 4 daily. Talking at least 30 to 40 truckloads of goods for 11,000 people. But of course, that includes electricals as well.
Along with the representatives of dozens of international media outlets, all this proves that the false allegation raised by the Israeli occupation forces are fabricated. They are targeting the medical facility.
I don't believe the videos that are circulating from Israel at all. I believe half of it is a Mossad. Sorry.
The army had said earlier that they will expand their ground operations in Gaza on Friday night.
In addition to the attacks that we carried out in recent days, ground
Right, I'm going to make me some food. I'll be back in 5.
The IDF is acting
If you come in
on all levels to achieve the objectives of the war.
We're going to take you back now to the United Nations in New York and listening to
the General Assembly is called to order. The General Assembly will resume its consideration of Agenda Item 5, entitled Illegal Israeli Actions in Occupied East Jerusalem and the rest of the occupied Palestinian territory. In light of the decision taken by the General Assembly earlier today to suspend the debate on agenda item this afternoon, the Assembly shall now proceed to consider draft resolution A/ES10/L25 and amendment A/ES10/L26. Before proceeding further, I would like to inform members that the draft resolution and the draft amendment have posed for e-sponsorship. I now give the floor to the representative of the Secretariat.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before the President gives the floor for explanations of vote before the vote, I should like to announce additional co-sponsors of both the two L documents. First, on L26. Since the submission of the draft resolution and in addition to the delegations listed on the L document, the foreign countries have also become co-sponsors of A/ES10/L25. Bear with us.
I have no idea what any of that meant.
Austria, Belgium, Bulgaria. No. Bear with us. Additional sponsors for L25. This is L25. Bahrain, L25 additional co-sponsors. Bahrain, Bangladesh, Belize, Plurinational State of Bolivia, Botswana, Brunei Darussalam, Comoros, Cuba, Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Djibouti, Egypt, El Salvador, Indonesia, Iraq, Jordan. So those are original sponsors. I'm very sorry. Those were already on the L document. Additional co-sponsors are Azerbaijan, Bahamas, Chad, China.
As for normal, the United Nations have no idea what they're doing.
Again, additional co-sponsors in addition to those on the L document are Azerbaijan, Bahamas, Chad, China, Gambia, Timor-Leste, and Uganda. If any other countries wish to co-sponsor L25.
Okay, we'll move away from that for just a moment and get some
Yeah, because he's talking a load of trash.
Who's here with us in Doha.
He's got no idea what he's doing or saying.
What we expect to happen.
You're seeing how the General Assembly works, and it sometimes can be a little bit chaotic. We have two different things that are going to be put to the vote. We have the original.
Right, as I said, I'm going to get some pudding.
Group of countries at the United Nations, which is calling for an immediate, durable, and sustained humanitarian truce. This is the resolution. What they've just done is go through the names, because some additional countries have said they want to sponsor this as well, and most notably China's added its name. Russia is already a sponsor, as is Turkey, as is a number of other key countries. That's the one. Then there is an amendment. This is the amendment, which is also going to be voted on. This is an amendment that has been produced by Canada. And then we learned a couple of hours ago that the US also are co-sponsoring this amendment. Now, why is there the amendment? We heard the US ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, said there were things that were missing from this resolution. And she said that was a clear condemnation of Hamas, naming Hamas, because Hamas is not named in the Arab resolution, and also a condemnation of, I quote, the taking of hostages, and the resolution also demands the safety, well-being and humane treatment of those captives being held. So those are the two votes we're going to see. It'll take some time, I think, the procedure. I think what we're also going to have, from what they've just said, is some additional some statements before the two votes. So we're going to hear some speeches in a moment from a couple of the countries who are proposing this, notably Jordan, who is proposing the original resolution, and Canada, who is proposing the amendment. So I would suspect we're not going to actually see the votes probably for 20 minutes or so, would be my guess.
Okay, just one more for you, because you brought up Jordan a moment ago, and we've had some comments from the Jordanian foreign minister who says that voting against the Arab resolution, presumably the original resolution, means, quote, approving the senseless war, the senseless killing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the Arab nations have made it very, very clear how important they feel this moment is. I have to say at the same time, though, we've seen in the last couple of hours, in fact, while the US ambassador was speaking, we saw the communications cut in Gaza, as our reporters have been telling us from there, and we saw that bombardment, that very, very big bombardment. We now know from the Israelis that they're intensifying a ground operation. So does this resolution have any chance of creating a truce? I think the Israelis are showing their defiance of this whole process and are going to go ahead with their military options whatsoever. But why this is important still is this is taking the temperature of the world. Unlike the Security Council, where there are only 15 nations, in the UN General Assembly, every single country who's a member state of the UN, 193 countries are represented. Every single country will have the chance, electronic voting, to press a button shortly, and we'll see where they stand on the war in Gaza. That's why this is important.
Yeah, and just for clarity, I mean, this resolution is in fact non-binding, but as you're saying, it's sort of going to test the the barometer of world opinion?
Absolutely. That's why it's important, but I don't think it's going to change anything. I'm afraid to say, even though in the Security Council they have not achieved anything, they are still working on a resolution. In fact, Malta's doing the negotiation, trying to get a compromise, because everything has either failed in the Security Council or been vetoed in the Security Council. It's worth noting, though, that even if the Security Council got a resolution, which is supposed to be binding international law, there are so many resolutions in the Security Council that Israel does not obey and ignores.
Thank you, James. Let's cross back to the UN and listen to the Jordanian ambassador for just a moment.
Obligations on behalf of the Arab group. This resolution is brought forward under the 10th Emergency Special Session Agenda Item 5, addressing illegal Israeli actions in occupied East Jerusalem and the rest of the occupied Palestinian territory. It has garnered co-sponsorship from 47
what did I miss?
Of this esteemed General Assembly. Mr.
Hi guys.
The situation in Gaza is dire, characterized by immeasurable suffering, where the
They don't have a clue what they're doing, you're right.
have been violated
But as things are moving so fast, it's not really surprising.
And the extensive destruction of civil infrastructure are destined to leave a lasting mark on generations to come. Since the eruption of this cycle of violence and conflict on 7th October, over 7,000 Palestinians, innocent Palestinians, have tragically lost their lives, including women, children, elderly, health workers, and UN staff. The urgent
Right,
for an
I don't know whether I said this before, but in Gaza, you've got two sets of tunnels. You've got one set of tunnels that belong to Hamas, which are normally half in Gaza, half in Israel. So you'll have a tunnel that's 3 kilometers long. One will be, half of it will be in Gaza, half of it will be in Israel. What they do is they then make a junction. One side goes one way, one side goes the other way. The one that goes to the right, they dig upwards, they go under the tanks, and they plant explosive under the tanks. That's the Hamas tunnels. And then you got the smuggling tunnels that go from Egypt to Gaza, and the guys that build them are the smugglers. They're nothing to do with Hamas at all, and they get paid $25 a day for working 12 hours a day to build these tunnels. Most of them get killed either by cave-ins, Egypt, or Israel airstrikes.
For the civilian population in Gaza. Moreover, it pleads for the immediate and efficient release of captives.
I watched a couple of videos last night. One was what's his name, out of EastEnders. He went down the smugglers tunnel, and then one of the other guys, he went down the Hamas tunnel, and there's a lot of difference.
Is a two-state solution rooted in pertinent UN resolutions and international law. In a time of crisis and uncertainty, this path offers hope for a just and lasting peace. Finally, I would like to remind delegations that Israel is responsible for the atrocities that are being committed now, and that will be committed in their ground invasion of Gaza. Do not support any effort to legitimize such atrocities, as we are seeing.
Right, I'll be right back. Let me just check my pipe, because I don't want the
horrendous aggression against the Palestinian people in Gaza. In this context, I call for a vote on Canada's Amendment L26. Thank you, President.
I thank the the representative of Jordan for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Canada.
Thank you, President. We meet here today to take action and to show the people of Gaza and the people of Israel that we see their plight, the devastation they are facing, and the need to find ways to get more urgent help to them, given the gravity of their despair, and to deal with the causes of that despair. Any life lost is a tragedy. There is no hierarchy of death. Yet the critical reason for how we got here has already been forgotten by so many, as if it never happened. But just 2 weeks ago, Hamas terrorists killed over 1,400 Israelis, not even mentioned in the comments by my friend from Jordan, with their own hands and weapons, and wreaked sheer terror on the people of Israel.
No, they didn't kill 1,400 Jewish people. They killed 1,400 people from all over the world.
Since that day, October 7th, over 7,000 Palestinians. And just 3 days ago, when I spoke to the Security Council, it was over 5,000. So we can see the need for a rapid response from this organization to deal with the humanitarian crisis. Those who have been living under Hamas's tyranny have been killed, and over 1 million are displaced. This is what has prompted this body, this emergency special session, into action. Nous reconnaissons les efforts considérables déployés par les rédacteurs pour prendre en compte les commentaires.
Well, I have a thing on my website where people can pay me £50 one-time fee, and I'll put their advert on top of the blogs. So when I finish this blog later on, I'll embed it into the website. Then you can come along, you can pay £50, and your banner ad will be there for life. So I've got the website for at least the next 10 years, which means you'll get, well and truly get your £50 back over the 10-year period.
Bob Ray speaking now, the ambassador of Canada, and so he's putting forward the amendment to the Jordanian Arab resolution. He is making the point that you heard the US ambassador make earlier on, that the resolution is missing a vital piece in the view of those two countries, and I suspect some of the other Western countries. They say that Hamas must be named for the events that took place on the 7th of October. And
no, Hamas mustn't be named. What they must say is the world will not tolerate acts of terrorism on any land anywhere in the world. You can't say Israel, you can't say Hamas, Hezbollah. You've got to say, we will not tolerate terrorist activity in the world, and we will not tolerate butchery of innocent women and children.
Reconnecting the water, food, medical supplies, fuel, and electricity. Where does the General Assembly stand on this amendment? Where does the General Assembly stand on the resolution without the amendment? We're going to find out first whether the amendment passes, and then they'll vote on the resolution, either amended or not. Right. I have to say, we've been working the phones and speaking to lots of diplomats, and it's pretty unclear where this is.
I can be a diplomat because I don't mix words. I'm not here to be polite. I'm here to get a point across, and I don't care what language I use. You know? It's about making people listen.
41 member states have nationals being held hostage. What is undeniably an ongoing war crime has to be brought to an end. We all understand in this chamber that war has rules. We share a common obligation to protect civilians, to respect
Yeah, well,
international
I can get my channel out there to the viewers by you people sharing it. See, this is what you people fail to understand. People, like, when I joined Facebook 20 years ago, I'd have gone on Facebook saying, right, I'm in the poo, I need help. I'd have 54,000 people following me to you, right? If 10 people, if I share to 10 people daily, those 10 people share to 10 people, I've got 100 people sharing my website. The following day, they all share to 10 people. That's 1,000. The following day, those 10 people, that's 1 million. Those million shared to 10, that's then 10 million. Within 10 days, I can have 150 million views of my website. Within 11 days, I can have 300 billion views on my website. But people will not share. That's the problem. As you saw from Duda's comment earlier, he was only here to destroy the chat room.
Ending this terrorist attack, after we have had the courage to name it, and ending the power of terrorist organizations in the region, has to be one of the steps that we can all agree needs to be taken. This is why I'm urging all of you to support this amendment, which brings balance to the resolution and names what must be named. What we are proposing is factual and it is fair. If our amendment is adopted, it will allow many member states to support the text as a whole, including Canada. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Canada for his statement, and I now invite Pakistan, the distinguished representative of Pakistan, to take the floor.
All right, so we'll move away from the General Assembly for a moment to get some analysis with our diplomatic editor, James Bay. So, James, the ambassador from Canada putting forward their argument as to why they want this amendment in the original resolution.
Absolutely. And again, you're now hearing Munir Akram, who's the ambassador of Pakistan. That's another one of the original sponsors of the original resolution. So
if you think about what I just said, this is how they worked out COVID. Yeah. After 11 days, I can have 300 billion people on my website. Now, if you go back to lockdown and COVID, it's the same scenario. 10 people with COVID connect with 10 people, and the maths does exactly the same. This is why we went into lockdown, because within 11 days, 300 billion people of the world could be dead. We've only got 8 billion.
And cut off Gaza from the outside world, how that is going to impact the decisions of these countries, because clearly the developments have been very, very fast moving. They only came back from their lunch break for this session about 35 minutes ago. And I think in the first session before their lunch break, they weren't really aware of what was going on the ground and this bombardment. So they will, I think all of the ambassadors would have been briefed by their diplomats, by their staff about what's happened, and will that have an impact on the decisions that we're going to see made in that vote, which I think is coming up pretty shortly now.
Right, and James, we also heard from the Jordanian ambassador before the Canadian ambassador was speaking, one of the sponsors of the original resolution. What did he have to say?
Yeah, this is Mahmoud, who is a very experienced diplomat. In fact, he's been most of the last decade, he's been at the United Nations, was the Jordanian deputy ambassador when Jordan was on the Security Council, and then went back to Oman for a bit, and now a very experienced ambassador back in the chair as the ambassador of Jordan. He's the one who's been doing this very, very detailed detailed work on behalf of the Arab group of countries of trying to get this resolution together. And they've been working on this intense negotiations for days. What I think that Arab group are hoping to achieve, and what he said in the resolution, was a very clear signal of where the world stands on the current situation, a clear condemnation of Israel, but also an effort to try and get this humanitarian truce. Israel, though, is showing by its actions on the ground.
We can now speak across to the U.S. and bring in the Pentagon spokesman, Brigadier General Patrick Ryder. Welcome to Al Jazeera. Thank you for your time and speaking to us. If I may start off with what's happening in Israel and the announcement that was made by the military spokesperson earlier on, saying that they're expanding their ground operations in Gaza. From what you understand that to be?
Yeah, sure. Well, certainly we're monitoring the situation, but as I'm sure you can appreciate, I'm really not going to be able to speak to Israeli operations or potential operations or planning timelines. So I'd really...
Operations, is there going to be a ground offensive?
What our focus is on is threefold. Number one is making sure that we understand what Israel's defense needs are when it comes to protecting themselves from potential future attacks by Hamas. But also, more broadly speaking, we continue to work with partners in the region to ensure that we can deter Iranian and one going into the Central Command area of responsibility. And then also, importantly, ensuring that we have